Whether you're a seasoned Davinci Resolve vet or you're just getting started with the switch from another editor, you should always be looking for ways to improve your editing workflow and become a better editor. Well, today I'm going to show you 7 of my favorite tricks in Davinci Resolve to help you do just that. Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm gonna be breaking these tips down by category. We'll start with the edit page, then do some of the color grading and color tab page, and then I'll show you one of my favorite tips on the export page that I've been using a lot lately. There's actually technically more than 7 tips here because one of them breaks down into 3 different sub-tips, so we got a lot for you. Okay, let's start out in the edit page. So the first trick is the new guides, which is available with Davinci Resolve 20. This has been a huge request of mine and many others. To access the guides, all we need to do is come up here into the ruler guides. So we have both rulers and guides. So there's a few ways we can add this. We can do that, or we can go up to view guides as well, or view rulers. Now, to add a guide, we can do a few different things. We can just drag from the ruler down, and then we'll have a guide. We can move these all around, and then we can move these up and down as well. And then same with the side here too. Now, these will lock in a few different places as you drag them, so it'll lock in the middle. So if we just want to have a little crosshair there, we could do that. And then if we want to add a guide that's not just dragged, like we want to add it to a more precise spot, we can right-click on the ruler and hit Add Guide. And then this allows us to either add it in pixels or the percentage. So for example, let's say we wanted to cut this into 4 different columns. We could do like a 20% vertical, add that there, and then do another guide, do percentage, 40% vertical, add that there, and then we do another guide, 60% vertical, add that there. Let's move this one for ease sake, and then add guide at 80%. And so now we have our columns, and then we can start to align things based on those. So I do this all the time when I'm adding text onto my videos. So for this one, I was doing like this, like multi-stepped grid of scores for a lens I was reviewing, for example, and I wanted to make sure everything was all lined up. So I could create these guides, and then I could position these things over. So like, let's make sure that everything just kind of starts on that guide. And then this one, I want this to start on that guide. And then maybe for the stars, I want to slide this over so that it's aligned with that as well. Another thing that I really like to do with this is if I'm doing a match cut, I'll create like a little crosshair. So like, let's say I wanted to, I had something here I wanted to match cut on this screen. I'll just add that little crosshair there, and then I'll just line up everything on one particular crosshair. I did a whole separate video on match cuts, but that was before this ruler and guide thing was out. So huge excitement for this. I'll link to that video up there and down in the description as well. So one thing that you often want to do if you're editing to music is you want to be cutting on the beat of the music. This will kind of help to drive your story forward and just makes it feel like it should be cutting in time with the beat. What you used to have to do is you would just kind of have to line it up. Maybe you'd like add a marker, for example, on where the beats happened. You'd have to like sit there and like try to be a human metronome hitting M over and over again. Now, all you have to do is you have to right click on an audio track and select Show Music Beats. AI will do a little bit of thinking, and then it will just add beat markers onto our song right here for us. And if you have the magnetic snapping enabled, you can actually just drag straight to those beats, and it will just cut to the beat of the song without you having to do much of anything at all. So you could just real quickly just bam, boom, bing, bom, bada, bam, bow. Look at that. Super easy. Okay, so this next one is far and away the biggest time saver that I've had in my editing over the last few years. So that previous example you saw, we had these like animating stars that popped up, right? Well, I don't know how to do a bunch of intricate graphics and motion tracking and stuff like that. I don't have time for that stuff. What I do have instead is motion VFX. So specifically, I use the mHowTo plugin the most. So these stars, for example, come from the mHowTo plugin. Now, this one is called rating. These little stars things are called ratings. So in order to add those in, I'm just gonna come over to my effects tab and I'll just type in mHowTo, and then we have all these different effects that we can choose from. So here's that mHowTo rating, for example. You see if we kind of hover over, it like pops up some stars for us. So I'm gonna drag this onto the timeline. I'll just do here, and let's make this black so it's easier to see. So this animates in, stars pop up, great. This is still super customizable, however. So one thing I first like to do is hit 4K quality. And then if we expand all of our options here, we can see what we're working with. So the content controls, this is gonna like place where we want it to be. So, you know, we have our ruler guides, obviously. We're gonna want it to be along one of those guides. So I'll line it up with this one, for example. And then we can still customize this a bunch more. Like I could make this bigger, or I could change the star count. Like maybe want to do a bunch of stars. We could do 10 stars. We could do 3 stars. I don't know. 5 seems reasonable. How spaced out we want the stars to be. That's for star offset. We do star size. We could do star thickness. Make some thick boys. And then our rating value is going to determine how many of them are colored. The other nice thing too is if you want to have some specific branding, you could change your color as well. So let's maybe bring this back down. Let's say like I want to have more like of a gray, muted gray as the kind of unselected stars. And then for your stars, maybe you want to do red stars, for example, or you want to do blue stars or teal stars or whatever. You could change these however you see fit. If we're on a non-black background, we could add a drop shadow. But then there's tons of other stuff that we can add in here as well. So like we have these animated arrows, we have these animated crosses, we have little charts and things. I use these things all the time. So with Motion VFX, this is actually a big suite of plugins that makes it super easy to make customizable motion graphics, titles, callouts, color grades, and a ton of other tools. There are a ton to choose from, but my favorites are this mHowTo, mTuber, and mTitles Cinematic. There's like 40 to 100 different effects in each pack, and then each of them has a tutorial to show you how to most customize and get the most out of each of your packs. Motion VFX is one of the longest running sponsors on this channel, and I think a big part of that is because so many of you find it so useful and have gotten them. So a huge thank you to you for supporting Motion VFX, and a huge thank you to Motion VFX for continuing to sponsor this channel. This next trick is great for both the edit and the color page. It's done in the color page though, so good transition into the color page. So when we're in the color page, let's say we wanted to make an edit or a color change to just the subject. Let's do that with the new AI magic mask that is available in Davinci Resolve 20 and beyond. So let's add a new node, new serial node. We can just ignore all this other color grade node tree. We'll talk about more of that in a second here. And we're just gonna call this one mask. Let's go over to our AI magic mask, which is this icon here. And let's say I want to mask just myself. Well, first things first, I want to find a good spot, a good reference where all of myself that I'm going to be tracking is going to be in the frame. So if I was out of frame, I want to make sure that I'm all in the frame. Now we're going to use our little eyedropper here and we're going to click on a spot. Now then, to see what that mask has selected so far, we can select this, that'll toggle on and off a red overlay, or we can also do Shift H and that will then just show us the thing that has been masked in question. So it's masked my jacket, which is nice. Let's say I wanted to change the color of my jacket. I could just go with the global and like, oh look, we got a nice bright green or bright blue jacket, or a nice pink or red jacket. If I want to change the color of my jacket, easy way to do it. But I'm going to be moving throughout the frame. So let's go back to our magic mask, and maybe I do want to do more than just my jacket. Maybe I want to do my entire body, for example. So we're going to hit that plus icon and we're going to add another mask to make sure that it's got my hat and my legs. If we do this little overlay, cool. That's got pretty much all of myself. You can do faster or better quality. The better quality, I actually sometimes find that it's worse. So you can see like if we just kind of toggle through here, it adds like kind of a lot of pixelation on the edges, whereas faster, I think it actually does a better job. You can kind of toggle through and see which one does a better job for you. In this instance, I've found that faster works better. Now, we also want to make sure that we're just getting the right portions of it. So we can use our refinement here on the edge as well. So shrink will shrink the selection in and then We could do grow, which will grow the selection out. So let's do like a shrink radius. So like if I go 0, you can see like it kind of gets the rough edges, but if I just go in 1, just tucks it in a little bit and does a nice little bit of blur. Then we can kind of smooth this out, get a little blur radius going so it's not as just like pixelated on the edges. Clean black is going to take the outer portion and kind of shrink it in just a little bit on the finer edges. And then clean white will expand the edges. So in this instance, that's not what we want to do. And then I also like to do a little bit of denoise as well to, again, get a little bit rid of that pixelation. So that is the selection that we have to start. And now I want to track that selection forwards and backwards because you can see it's not at the beginning of the clip. So I'll just go ahead and hit this track forward and backwards button. And then how long this takes is going to depend on how fast your machine is. Okay, so now that that has gone, we can kind of track through here and see that it has done a pretty good job of tracking along with me. So let's say I wanted to change all of myself to be bright blue. I could do that. You can see that it tracks through and I'm bright blue the whole way through. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense though, however. One thing you might want to do instead, however, is maybe I want to make the subject kind of pop a little bit more. So we could, for example, increase our offset just a little bit, kind of make it pop, or maybe not do the offset, maybe just do the gamma just a little bit there, not go as super overboard. Increase our gamma, and then maybe we want the background to be a little bit more muted or toned down. We could then do right click here and then do add a outside node. So that's going to take everything outside of the mask. And now maybe I want to just kind of like drop down the offset a little bit there. So if we look at what this has done with this little inside outside, it just made your subject pop out just a little bit more on the frame. Now there are a few other interesting things that we can do with this magic mask method. So what if we wanted to add some text, but I, the subject, kind of walk in front of the text? So the text is between me and the background. Let's show you how you can do that. So if we hop back into the edit tab here, let's go ahead and take this layer that we've tracked and we're just gonna move it up 2, and then we're gonna hold Alt or Option on our keyboard and then duplicate it to bring it down. So we have 2 versions of that same layer. This one is the one that we've already tracked. This is a new one that we've just duplicated. Let's go back into our color page here. And on this new one, you'll see that it's red. That's the one that's not tracked. Let's just go ahead and delete that mask. We're not going to need it. But then on the one that we have already tracked, so we do have our mask, we're going to right click in here and do add alpha output. And then we're going to connect this blue square to this blue dot. Now what this does here, I'll just turn this layer off so you can see. What that does is it basically removes the background. So anything that's outside of that mask that we created is going to have been removed. So now back in the edit page, I could just do like some normal text like this Futura font, but let's use motion VFX, shall we? So we have those M title cinematic that I mentioned. Let's pop that back there and then drag this out to be the whole length. As I mentioned, we're gonna do that 4K quality. This one has a black background on it, so I'm gonna turn that off. And then let's see, I don't think we need that the strangers. Let's just do like, let's just call it what it is, Yosemite. And then we can use these content controls to move it down. So this will then animate in, boom, and then I'm gonna walk in front of it there. This actually looks pretty sick. And I've been doing this for a lot of my kind of more like short form cinematic stuff on Instagram. Now I have walked in front of that Yosemite and it's also animated. So I'm moving, it's behind me, it's tracked, it's masked. I think that's pretty sick. Okay, so let's get into some more advanced stuff on color grading. So the first is a better way to add saturation. So you're likely familiar with just this normal saturation slider on the bottom here. You drag it up, it adds saturation, you drag it down, it desaturates it. The issue with this version of saturation is it's saturating both, it's doing both upping the saturation of the pixels and the brightness of the colors as well. What we want to do is just up the saturation instead. So I'm going to give you 2 different ways to do this and you can decide which one you like the best. So the first is just our standard way. Let's just increase the saturation by like 30 or so. So we'll increase it to 80. That looks pretty saturated, right? Like I start to look a little bit like an Oompa Loompa, which isn't super cool. I'm just gonna grab a still of this so we can compare it later. Let's do a new node and we're gonna disable this one and we're gonna call this one saturation HSV. So now what we'll do is we'll right click on that node and change the color space of just this node to HSV. HSV stands for hue, saturation, and value, which roughly translates to hue, saturation, and luminance or brightness. Now I mentioned we only want to impact the saturation of the pixels, not the brightness. So what we do now is we right click and go to channels and we're gonna deselect 1 and we're gonna deselect 3. As I mentioned, hue, saturation, value, that's channel 1, 2, and 3. If we disable channel 1 and channel, whoops, if we disable channel 1 and channel 3, then we're left with just saturation. Now what we do is we go into our gain wheel and we drag that up. And you'll notice we're start to add saturation, but we're not changing the brightness values of that saturation. So let's do a little still of this as well, and then we can just compare between the two. Move this out of the way so it's a little bit bigger. So this is just the saturation slider, and this one is that HSV style saturation. So in my mind, this is a much better way to add saturation. It gives this kind of nice, more cinematic quality to your saturation. Now, this next trick for color grading is something I use in basically every edit that I do as well. And this is called glow pop, or that's what I call it, glow pop. A lot of people will add glow. It kind of adds this like dreamy haziness to it. But what this glow pop does is it actually adds some of that dreamy glow while still keeping the shadows nice and punchy. So what we'll do is we'll create a new node, we'll just Command S or Option S, and then we're gonna look under Effects for Glow and drag that onto the node. The first thing I do is under Advanced Controls, I wanna change the composite type from Add to Soft Light. This is gonna make things really dark. Just hold off a second. We're gonna get there. Next, we'll come up to our shine threshold and our spread. So this is gonna determine like how much of that glow is happening. So what the shine threshold is doing is it's saying, you know, how bright does the pixel have to be for it to be impacted by this glow? So dragging it this way means more of the thing is gonna be impacted by the glow. Dragging it this way is less of it is gonna be impacted by the glow. So if we drag it pretty far this way, you can now see we have a lot more of that glow coming in. I like to keep it around like 0.15-ish, give or take, depending on the scene. Like this one's a brighter scene. If it's a darker scene, you know, depends on how much highlights you have. And then the spread is how much is that glow going to spread out versus just be a little bit more subdued. I like to keep this somewhere around like the 0.4-ish. We can also, as you're doing this, you can select glow alone and it'll show you how much of the scene is being impacted. So if we want to dial it back a little bit, we could do, you know, somewhere around here instead, then come back to final result. Now, the next thing I like to do is I like to make this more of a warm glow. So we can go to our color filter and then select a yellow, but I don't like to select a very saturated yellow. I like to drag it down to like this kind of desaturated orangish, yellowish thing right here, maybe somewhere like there. Hit OK. Now, this looks terrible. What we do instead, so every time I'm editing, I like to kind of go overboard and then dial it back. It kind of helps you see what you're doing, and then we want to dial it back. So an easy way to dial it back is with the opacity. If we then drag this down somewhere around 0.2-ish, maybe, looks pretty good. Now you can see that we have a nice warm glow, but still keeping the punchiness of the shadows. It kind of takes away some of that harsh digital look that we get with modern cameras and adds a nice warm glow to it. And here's the before and after, kind of just enhances that sunrise vibe that we have going here. And if you like the color grades that I've been doing lately, I am in the very final touches of releasing my first LUT drop. This will be available by the end of October. So if it's after October you're watching this, it will be available in the link in the description. If not, however, you should just hit subscribe so you'll be the first to know. And if you're not subscribed already, like, what are you doing? Okay, now this last trick is in the export tab. So I don't know if you have seen this trend on Instagram, but I have noticed that what people are kind of calling like these video postcards are performing very well. So it's multiple single clip videos in a carousel rather than in a reel. Now, what I used to be doing is I would like export each of these little clips individually. I'd like do like a in and then an out point, and then I'd go to my export tab and export that. And then I go to the next one, I do in and out point, and I'd export that. We don't have to do any of that. What we can do instead is say we just have all of our clips here. So instead we just go to our export tab, and under render, instead of selecting render single clip, we're gonna do individual clips. What this is gonna tell Resolve to do is render each of these clips as individual files. And then we can also go into our file and like we could change the, have like a custom name for each one, do like a subfolder or whatever. And then if I just add to render queue, you can see that it has added 16 clips to the render queue. And if I hit render all, it will just render those all each individually as single clips. This is good for this, postcards type thing, but it's also good if you're just like sending graded stuff off to a different editor or, tons of different reasons why you might want to do this. All right, so those are some of the tricks that I've been using to streamline my editing process in Davinci Resolve. There are a ton more tricks that I have. So if you liked this style of video, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.